Hello, everyone. This is Emily Long. I am the mother of Grace and Lily, both gone too soon. I'm also the author of the books Invisible Mothers, You Are Not Alone, and the upcoming From Father to Father book. And I am here today with Lori Davis, who is the mother and mama of Elliot. And she is going to share some of her thoughts for our Voices of Loss series about what it's like to live after loss, share a little bit of her story and her thoughts around why we talk about this stuff and why it's important. So I'm going to let Lori have her say.
Thank you, Emily. Um, so, my daughter's name is Elliot. She was stillborn on March 30th, 2015. I had a really great pregnancy. Went up to 41 weeks and everything looked good. Unfortunately, there were some issues with my placenta that went undetected until it was too late, and those issues weren't diagnosed until after birth. Basically, there were several problems with the placenta. One was I had clotting, and there was also placenta insufficiency. It was just kind of crummy from the beginning, but still it functioned well enough.
Right.
Elliot was a good sized baby, 7 pounds, 11 ounces. But unfortunately, just at the very end, it stopped working and she just couldn't sustain on her own for too long. So, it's been a very long, difficult year and a half without her. She, um, being my first baby and everything like that, is just something that I never even realized was a possibility, losing her, especially after, you know, making it through the first trimester and, the quote unquote safe zone. We knew that there were potential risks, but, just everything was going so well. We didn't realize that things could take a turn like that at the very end. So I remember before Elliot was born, but after we had found out that she passed away, just sort of thinking to myself, and wondering how can I go home and just pretend like she never existed. I didn't know anyone who had ever experienced a stillbirth. And, even miscarriage. I did know some people who had gone through miscarriages, but it was talked about so little, and definitely I never heard of anyone personally who had experienced a stillbirth. And so I just thought that I would be expected to kind of go home, move on, and just pretend like nothing ever happened. And I really couldn't wrap my head around that, like how, we had made space for her
Right.
in our lives. And it turned out that luckily we have very supportive family and friends, and that was not the expectation at all.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay. Well, tears are very much allowed. I
um,
don't think we can go through this without crying.
right? um, so yeah, it was just, I felt so alone as a mother to
Right.
start. And I immediately wanted to, well, first off, after realizing that we weren't expected to, my husband Ben and I, we weren't expected to just sort of pick up where we left off and pretend like Elliot didn't exist. Everyone, luckily, acknowledged that yes, we are still her parents. She is still our daughter, and that will never change. I think for us, that helped immediately, like from the very beginning. But then there was, this place of, just loneliness. And because we didn't know anyone else who had experienced something like this, we felt like we were the only people in the world um, who had, experienced such a loss. And it wasn't until, I actually went Facebook and started finding all of these like different support groups,
Right.
that I realized, wow, like this is not that rare, and we are very far from alone. And there are lots of other people out there who have gone through very similar experiences. Um, and I just think, for me, like I really needed to hear about um, this story, other people's stories, and the fact that those people survived something
Right.
so horrific, and tragic. And because I didn't know, that was another thing. Is I didn't know, like, how are we going to survive this? I had like all of the worst case scenarios running through my mind. Um, and we found out that you know early on it was going to take a lot of work. And it's still every day it's work. But you can survive this. And over time, after connecting with people and hearing other stories, and like getting my feet back on the ground, um, I was able to sort of learn how to find pieces of the old me. And just sort of start living again. And I think that's why it's so important to continue to talk about our babies and what we've gone through, so that other people know that they're not alone.
Right.
And when something like this does happen, it completely rocks your world. You will never be the same, but you can still live a fulfilling life.
Right. There can be life after loss.
Yeah,
Oh.
absolutely. And and in terms of talking about our babies and stuff, I think one of the biggest things that another thing that I was really worried about is that Elliot would be forgotten. And even those first few weeks, I just remember like studying like all of her pictures, because I was so worried that I was going to forget like what she looked like. And
Right.
um, which is not the case at all. Um, and so I think, just to sort of continue to talk about her and to know that she's not going to be forgotten is so helpful as a mother.
Right.
And, just to acknowledge that she existed, and is very important part of grieving,
Right.
and that learning how to live your life again.
Right.
Um, and there are ways to include your babies. I've personally found ways, to include Elliot in my day to day life, because that was another thing, is like how I still very much wanted to mother.
Right.
And it's like, well, how do you do that without a baby physically in your arms? But it is possible. I mean, I do it every day.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I think just continuing the conversation and figuring out what works for you personally, and getting ideas on like how you can still include your baby. For me, Ben and I read to Elliot, in utero, every evening, and sort of that's become like one of our rituals. Is we still like to read in the evening. We'll pick out a children's book. We're still growing her library, and it's just it feels good to feel like we can still be able to do stuff for her, even
Right.
though she's not here in our arms.
Right. Yeah, it's their presence may not physically be here, but it doesn't mean that that presence really ever goes away. It's still very much. And I think that's something that people don't realize, you know, is that their, whatever you want to call it, their spirit, their presence, their, that's something that they brought to our lives doesn't disappear.
Exactly.
You know, and one of the things that I say is like, yes, I was their mother when they were born, but I'm also going to still be their mother when I'm 90.
Mm-hmm.
you know, so that doesn't change.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I just think it's so important for people who have never experienced this kind of loss, to really, I mean, they're never going to understand, but, if they can sort of get at least bits and pieces of it. And
Right.
that's a big part of it, is that, we will never stop being mothers to our babies who are no longer here in our arms. Um, and, I think also another thing that I want people to understand, is that, the grief doesn't stop. There is no, I meant there is a beginning, but there is no end. And it's just so different for everyone. I don't know, even, before I lost Elliot, I kind of felt like, you lose a parent or grandparent, and yes, it's devastating, of course,
Right.
but, at a certain point, I don't know why I thought, people just sort of move on.
Right.
But I didn't understand that kind, I had never experienced like any kind of like big loss. Like I lost my grandmother, but she was sick and old. And of course, like I was very sad to lose her, but it was the like natural progression.
Right.
Um, and, I think that a lot of people think that that same like um, timeline of grief, even though I mean,
Right.
that it applies to um, infant or pregnancy and infant loss, and it doesn't. I'm not sure that it really applies to like any kind of grief, but
Right.
especially not this kind of grief. And it's even like a year and a half out from my loss, I still struggle um, a lot. I have my good days and I have my bad days, and I still cry a lot. I miss Elliot every single day, and that's something that's just it's never gonna go away.
Right. Yeah. I think I think people want to make loss neat and tidy. Like there's this timeline and then it's done. And that's just not what it is. And I think that most people who've been through it and been through it willing to really feel all that comes with it understand that and realize, oh, I can't. There's no predicting really what it's going to be like and what day to day is going to be like. Um, and the importance of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there anything? It's kind of a random question. Is there anything that you most wish that you could have shared, like with yourself back in those early days, or with people around you that would have been helpful? I mean, I know you had a pretty supportive family, but not everybody does. And so I'm wondering, like, if there's something that you either had or didn't have that you would say, I wish that this was more well known or understood. Maybe not. I'm kind of throwing it at you.
um. Oh, that's
It's a big question.
very, very good question. Um. I don't know. I mean, I think if I don't like the one thing that I really struggled with, and I don't I really struggled with the guilt and the blame.
Right.
Um, I blamed myself, and I felt incredibly guilty for Elliot's death. And I am at a point now where I no longer blame myself. I know that there was nothing that I could have done. But I think at the time, I think that was really a huge, huge issue for me. And I know that most, probably if not all,
Right.
mothers have that same feeling. And I don't know that there's any way around that. I think it's just um, how you feel when you lose a baby.
Right.
But I don't know, like in terms of support, yeah, I am incredibly lucky that like my husband and we have the support that we do. I again, I stillbirth wasn't anything that I knew any. It wasn't something that I knew anything about, and I don't know that like our friends and family necessarily did either.
Right.
But I don't know, somehow they just banded together and figured out how to support us, and it just so happened that it was the support that we needed.
Right.
Because I know sometimes, families, well, a lot of the time, they do have like the best intentions and they really want to support their loved ones who are going through this kind of loss, and they just don't really know how to do it, and the parents don't end up getting the support that they need because of that.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, that's fine. I mean, it sounds like your family was just there. Like they just sort of walked through it with you in a way that sort of everybody figuring it out together. And that I think is kind of what it takes for families. Like, you don't have to know how to support each other necessarily in terms of like what exactly to do, but just showing up and saying, we'll figure it out with you
Mhm.
might be a way of doing it. It sounds kind of like that's what you had.
Yeah, that's an excellent way to describe it. Yeah, they just showed up and they just said we'll figure this out together.
Right.
And so we just figured it out as we went, and they did their best to take cues from us, depending on how we were feeling on a particular day. And they were really good about asking what we needed, and that changed from day to day, and they knew that, and they didn't set any expectations
Right.
for us, which was really helpful. And so, yeah, we just sort of kind of walked through it together, and I mean, still today, it's the same thing. I think as we get further out from our loss, our feelings and our grief continue to change. Um, and so we're all still learning as we go.
Right. Yeah, it is a learning process, and I think it's a learning process for a lifetime because I think it's always going to keep changing on us.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, is there anything else that you want to say or want to add or share with people about this whole thing called life after loss and mothering and all of that?
I guess I think my advice, or I don't want to call it advice, but I don't know. One thing that I, would tell other mothers is, don't ever be afraid to talk about your baby or babies that you've lost. It might make other people who haven't ever walked this road uncomfortable to hear about your experience and your babies, but still keep talking about them. Do what feels right to you. If you want to talk about your babies, or sometimes you might just be having a day and you don't feel like talking, and that's okay too. But you're the one who is in charge, to a certain extent, of
Right.
course. You know what I mean? How
Right.
how you want to put your feelings and everything out to the world. Like, just don't be afraid to follow your heart in that regard.
Well, thank you very much for chatting with me, and we will maybe do this again sometime.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.